Welcome home to St. Anne's, a place of community, love, and faith. No matter who you are or where you are in your spiritual journey, there's a place for you at Christ's table. Join us Sundays at 10 a.m. or anytime online. We look forward to seeing you.
Fuzzy and comforted. And then there are passages like this one. This is not an easy gospel. Jesus says some things that make us uncomfortable. And the disciples behave in some ways that probably make us squirm just a little bit. And then Jesus himself appears to dismiss a desperate woman with words that, frankly, are difficult to reconcile with the Jesus we know. A Canaanite woman comes to Jesus because her daughter is suffering terribly. She cries out, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." And Jesus doesn't answer her. The disciples don't ask Jesus to help her. They ask him to send her away, like a fly that is annoying them. And when she refuses to leave, Jesus says something even more troubling. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she keeps going. She kneels before him, "Lord, help me." And Jesus answers, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." This is a hard passage. So what in the world do we do with it? I think we begin by resisting the temptation to make Jesus comfortable for us. Because if we rush to explain away Jesus' words, we may miss what Matthew is showing us. This woman is Canaanite, which is a designation that matters. Matthew could simply have called her a woman. Instead, he identifies her by ethnicity and ancestry. She is an outsider. She is part of a people with a long and complicated history with Israel. She's precisely the sort of person whom the religious and the cultural boundaries could place on the other side. And yet, she comes to Jesus. She crosses the boundary. She enters a space where she is not expected. She speaks when she is not expected to speak. She asks when she isn't expected to ask. And most importantly, she refuses to believe that God's mercy is as small as the boundaries people have constructed around it. "Lord, help me." That's all she has. She doesn't have a theological argument or credentials, no claim that she deserves anything, just trust, desperation, and faith. And that brings us back to the beginning of today's gospel. So before Matthew tells us the story of the Canaanite woman, we see Jesus is talking about purity. The religious leaders are concerned about external forces, external practices, what people eat, ritual washing, about what goes into a person's body. And Jesus says, "Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles." In other words, holiness isn't primarily about keeping the right things out. Holiness is about what's happening inside us and what comes out of the heart. Anger, cruelty, judgment, hatred, fear, pride. And then Matthew immediately gives us a story about a person who has been labeled an outsider. I don't think that's accidental. Because here's the question Matthew is putting before us. who is really on the outside? Is it the woman? Or is it the people who have decided she doesn't belong? Now, we know something about boundaries. We live with them everywhere. Some boundaries are good and necessary. We need boundaries that protect people. We need boundaries that create safety. We need boundaries that help us understand where responsibility begins and ends. But there are other boundaries. The boundaries we construct to determine who is worthy, who belongs, who's respectable, who's trustworthy, who's one of us, and who's not. Those boundaries can become so familiar that we stop noticing them. Now, we may call them common sense, we may call them tradition, or we may say that's the way things have always been. And sometimes we even convince ourselves that God put the boundary there. But the Canaanite woman won't stay on the other side. She comes to Jesus. And Jesus, in this story, is forced to confront the boundary himself. And there's something extraordinary happening here. The woman believes that God's mercy is bigger than the religious boundary separating her from Jesus. And eventually, Jesus agrees with her. "Woman, great is your faith." Now notice what Jesus praises. Not her ancestry, not her religious credentials, not her purity or conformity, her faith. So what is her faith? It's the audacious conviction that mercy from God is abundant enough for her too. That's something that's deeply Episcopal and deeply Christian. We come to this table every Sunday not because we've successfully made ourselves worthy. We come because God is merciful. We come because grace is not a scarce commodity. There isn't a limited supply of God's love that has to be carefully rationed. God's table is not a competition. There's no point at which God says, "I'm sorry, we've reached capacity." There's always room for mercy, always room for grace, always room for another person at the table. And that means that the question of this gospel isn't simply, do we believe in God's love? I think most of us would answer yes. The harder question is, who do we believe God's love is for? Because it's possible to believe that God's love is infinite, while quietly believing that some people are exceptions. And the Canaanite woman won't accept that. She sees something about Jesus that even the disciples haven't seen yet. She sees abundance where others see scarcity. She sees welcome where the disciples see exclusion. She sees mercy where others see a boundary. And she keeps knocking. She keeps asking. And I think there's another important detail in this story. The woman doesn't simply ask Jesus to help her. She's advocating for someone who has no voice in this story. Her daughter isn't standing there. Her daughter isn't making the argument.